We can start. Welcome to all of you who joined us today. The Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth and the International Labour Organization and YEO 2030 Initiative of Making Sense International welcome you all to this youth dialogue on investing in the sustainable, inclusive, and resilient future of work for youth. Today, we are going to learn about the main findings from Global Employment Trends for Youth 2022 report. You are welcome to contribute your ideas, perspective, and knowledge towards the achievement of SDG 8, which is on decent work and economic growth, especially on youth economic opportunities in the green and digital economy. If you are not talking, I would ask and request you to mute your mic. You will help us to shape the follow-up actions for the GEP Youth 2022 report in the line with ILO's Youth Employment Action Plan 2020 and 2030, the YEO 2023 Global Youth Economic Opportunities Summit. We're really excited to kickstart the agenda today. First, we will set the scene up by discussing the main findings presented by the Global Employment Trends for Youth 2022 report, followed by an overview of the YEO 2030 initiative. We will have breakout room thematic discussions on the green and digital economies, facilitated by our amazing facilitators, Patricia, Shukudi, and others, guided by a few questions. There you will be sharing your points, views, ideas, perspective, your demands, what are you thinking, your dreams, however you would like to, and a plenary discussion and Q&A will then follow up. Throughout the session, please feel free to type your questions and comments in the chat box. We will pick it up from there, as well as share what you are enjoying most about the discussion on social media and tag us, Youth Econ Off, and @Decent Jobs for Youth. I repeat, at Youth Econ Off and @Decent Jobs for Youth. We would like to make the dialogue as interactive as possible. Now I would like to introduce our amazing speakers today. Beom Kim, Macroeconomic and Employment Policies Specialist at the International Labour Organization. Niall O'Higgins, Senior Employment Research and Technical Specialist, also at the International Labour Organization. Vicky Aridi, Program Manager at the YEO 2030 Initiative. So now I welcome Key and Niall. Over to you, Key and Niall.
More than 280 million young people are not working and they're not studying. That's a pretty serious issue. Hello, I'm Niall O'Higgins, and together with my colleague Beom Kim, we're going to take you through some of the main findings of the Global Employment Trends for Youth Report 2022. I'll talk a little bit about the global trends and then say something about the digital and digital economy, and then I'll pass the floor to Key, who will look at green economies and talk a little bit about the general policy recommendations. So, global trends. There are about 1.2 billion young people in the world today. Amongst those, as I said, more than 280 are NEET. Amongst those, in 2021, 75 million were unemployed. In 2022, this fell to around 73 million, but this is still 6 million more young unemployed people than was the case before the COVID pandemic hit. To add to that, in 2023, in the light of the current conflicts throughout the world, but most specifically in Ukraine, we're expecting youth unemployment to increase a little further. Young people were more affected by COVID than adults, much more affected, also because They were concentrated, their employment was concentrated in areas which was hard hit by lockdown measures, but also because the COVID pandemic affected also education and training institutions. Young women were affected on multiple fronts, also due to unequal distribution of care responsibilities and pre-existing inequalities. But the issue is not just jobs themselves, it's also job quality. Even before the pandemic hit, 1 in 4 young people was in poverty despite the fact they were working, and 3 out of 4 young people were in informal employment. That is, without any protection at all against job loss or income support when they lose their jobs. So, to go back to the starting point, over 280 million young people are in NEET status today. In 2020, NEET rates rose as a result of the pandemic to the highest levels since records began in 2005. What we see is also there's a large, really big gender gap. 2 out of 3 young NEETs are young women. That is, the NEET rates amongst young women are twice as high as they are amongst young men. And although the NEET rates amongst young men actually increased more than NEET rates amongst young women during the crisis, the recovery also in male amongst young men was faster. So we have this general picture of clear disadvantage of young women in terms of their access to labour markets, and we'll come back to that. And in fact, we find that the picture is across more or less everywhere. Young women have much higher NEET rates than young men do, and this is particularly pronounced in Southern Asia and in the Arab states, but it is true more or less everywhere. And it has to do with the fact that whilst for young men, being NEET is generally about the lack of availability of job opportunities, female NEET rates are driven also by structural barriers to young women entering advanced education or the labour market. Also, youth unemployment rates are very high amongst young people, and this was worsened. So the youth unemployment rates went up more amongst young people than adults during the pandemic. In general, on average, youth unemployment rates are about 3 times as high as adult unemployment rates, but in some areas like Asia and the Pacific, they can be as much as 6 times the adult rates. So the key messages from the trends, global trends, are that first, young people were particularly hard hit by the COVID crisis in multiple dimensions, in job seeking, losing their jobs amongst those who had them, and in interruptions to their education and training. Young people who lost their job or failed to obtain one are particularly vulnerable to scarring. That is, these short-term interruptions to employment occasioned by the pandemic can lead to long-term impacts on their employment prospects. Similarly, disrupted education can cause significant learning losses, which in themselves can create long-term effects on young people's career paths. We also saw that global inequalities within and across countries, due to the heterogeneous direct and long-term effects of the COVID crisis, tended to hit vulnerable young people particularly hard. More generally, the COVID crisis has made the prospect of achieving many targets of the Sustainable Development Goals that much harder, and in particular, lowering the NEET rate, which is, after all, the primary Sustainable Development Goal target related to young people. So I'll say something more about green, but before doing so, as part of the global employment trends for youth, we did some simulations, some macroeconometric simulations of the impacts of investments in different areas, green economy, digital economy, care sector, on the long-term creation of jobs for young people. Key will talk about green, but I wanted to just mention that for a relatively small investment in terms of, in order to expand internet broadband coverage, we would expect nearly more than 6 million jobs to be created for young people. But what are we talking about when we talk about the digital economy? We take a rather broad picture, and digitalization is affecting work pretty much throughout the economy. And it's not just about computers and working in the computer ICT sector. So we take digital economy to mean economic activities which use digital information and knowledge and the internet as key inputs to the production, marketing, and distribution of goods and services. So it's not just a platform or gig economy, and we take it as a continuum. So there is more or less digitalization and we characterized economic sectors according to whether they're high, medium or low digital intensity sectors. High digital intensity sectors we define as the digital economy. Digitalization is affecting many industries therefore, and it's affecting them differently by age, sex and country income. A couple of points I'd like to make. One is that in high-income countries, youth involvement in the digital economy is greater, more extensive than it is in lower middle-income countries. Around 20% of young people in high-income countries are in the digital economy, around 12% in lower middle-income countries. But also the types of employment within digital economy is different in these two different types of economy, particularly in lower middle-income countries. Digital economy employment is concentrated in so-called other non-market services, whereas in high-income countries, it's more concentrated in the higher quality, higher paid communications, financial and professional sectors. Having said that, job quality is on average relatively high in the digital economy, and particularly so, it's particularly advantageous, if you like, in lower middle income countries. The difference between employment in high digital intensity sectors and low digital intensity is bigger in lower middle income countries. So the quality of work is pretty good on average. However, there are greater inequalities in the digital economy than there are outside it, particularly in lower middle income countries. And specifically, one needs a high level of educational attainment in order to profit from or to benefit from the digital economy, the high quality digital economy employment. And then I should mention the platform economy. We did some quite extensive analysis of crowd workers globally. And young people are particularly suited to online work and have some relative advantages. Young crowd workers in particular earn higher wages than older crowd workers. This is rather extraordinary really when you think about it, because typically wages fall with age. But due to the fact that young people learn, particularly online tasks, faster than older codgers like me, their wages increase fast with experience. So this makes it, given the outside alternatives, also particularly attractive to young people in lower income countries who can access markets outside their own country and labour markets outside their own country, and given the let's say lower wage alternatives that they face. However, there are a number of additional issues I wanted to mention. Young women tend to earn less, by around 20% less, controlling for other factors influencing wages. Also, the returns to education are pretty low, practically zero. And so the big gain over time is from returns to experience, like learning by doing, rather than returns to education. Although most crowd workers are relatively well educated. But perhaps the big issue here is that typically such forms of employment have no job security. And also there are issues like, for example, it's very difficult to create transferable competencies. So being able to show prospective employers outside this sector that one has acquired specific skills. And so there are a number of issues. They're starting to be dealt with by some policy interventions, the development of micro-credentials and so on, but this is a big issue which has yet to be fully dealt with. So to summarize, COVID-19 has reinforced the overall trend towards digitalization. The digital economy offers indeed significant opportunities for young people and on average relatively good job conditions, on average. But it's not open to all. These opportunities are not open to all. There are conditions for access, and in particular I'd highlight that this is mainly high-skilled employment open to more highly educated young people. And of course you need internet access, which is not a foregone conclusion in many parts of the world. digital employment also means less secure jobs. This was also accentuated during the pandemic, when in particular the less secured forms of digital employment were stimulated. And in general, action is needed to ensure that the benefits are not just reaped by a lucky few. That is, that the developments in the digital economy don't drive inequalities in youth labour markets. And with that, I'll pass the floor to Key.
Yes, so thanks very much, everyone. My name is Key, and I'm an economist with the ILO. So I'll just follow on from Niall and discuss and really just highlight a few issues in relation to youth employment in the green economy, and then wrap up our presentation by highlighting a few policy issues. Next slide, Niall, please. So both the current environmental crisis and the current youth employment crisis are very much closely related. And in fact, as illustrated by the graph on the left-hand side of your screen there, young people themselves, or Generation Z to be more precise, identified climate change or protecting the environment, as well as unemployment, as the top two personal concerns that young people have at this time. And so it's critical because there is, as highlighted in the ILO's guidelines on just transitions, it's critical to address the two issues together because of the urgency of the crisis. There's no time to address them separately or consecutively, and also because of resources. The resources are limited, and so we need to be able to address these concurrent crises together. At the same time, transitioning to the green and the blue economies do open up a number of opportunities. Greening or bluing the economy can be an engine of growth, as well as a net creator of decent jobs, which I will come back to a little bit more. Next slide, Niall. So, but it's important to highlight that, in this path to opportunity, there are a number of obstacles as well as the challenges. And let me just highlight a few. The first of these, perhaps, is that there is often, in different country settings, low awareness of what green jobs are, or what jobs in the green economy constitutes amongst young people. And this is not surprising, because there is no universal definition of green jobs. There's different definitions of it, as well as the green economy. So some people may take a more narrow definition of green jobs, focusing on very specific sectors that are that produce goods or output services for environmental services sectors, whereas others will take a broader definition, include those jobs that are created in other sectors but relate to more sustainable practice. Such, for example, in construction, there are firms in construction, but they also in some cases engage in the construction of more environmentally friendly buildings. And so there's some would encompass all of those jobs as part as green jobs with the green economy. At the ILO, we also insist that green jobs are also decent, and so there is also qualitative dimension there. So this also highlights, I think, it's an important issue, but also makes that the measurement and the conceptual definition of green jobs even more difficult. And we need to make progress on this, because at the end of the day, the world is undertaking, and different countries are undertaking, a wide array of policies in relation to growing the green economy, or green jobs, for example. And policymakers they need to be able to both evaluate but also design and monitor these policies. So solely from that point of perspective, that is critical. Next slide, please. Another perhaps challenge that we have in this transition to opportunity is that, similar to the digital economy that Niall has just mentioned, that access to these opportunities can be very different by gender. So this graph here provides the share of the number of young people in the very narrow environmental services sector. And as you can see from this graph, at the global level, at least, about young women only account for about a quarter of these jobs in the environmental services sector. In some regions, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, it's more the gender distribution is more even. But this highlights that, that as we progress towards, greening the economy, there's a need to take into account very closely the gender implications, as well as before we get there, even the obstacles that young women face, in particular in relation to accessing STEM or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. Next slide, please. So as Niall has mentioned, there will be opportunities as we transition to a green economy, 8.4 million additional jobs above the baseline, according to some of the modeling that we have undertaken. But as you can see also from the left-hand side, these job gains differ first by region, and of course, by implication by countries, as well as by gender, and not illustrated here, but also by sectors. So jobs that are lost in some sectors in some countries will not necessarily be the ones that are created in other countries and other sectors. But overall we do see this net effect primarily because green investments. So, for example, investing in building efficiency or in building retrofits are more per $1 million investment, actually more labor intensive than investments in fossil fuels. Next slide. So as a transition to green economy happens, we have seen already that one of the major employment creation areas is actually in that renewable energy. And here on the left-hand side of the graph, that breaks it down by the different renewable energy areas. But principally, it's being led by solar photovoltaic technology. So that's solar panels to leverage solar energy. And I think one encouraging thing with that, of course, is that the share of women in the renewable energy sector is actually higher than that on the overall energy sector. So it suggests that the transition to renewable energy can also make an important contribution to the advancement of gender equality. In the future, of course, the technologies are not yet known, and so which of these numerous technologies out there, as you very much know, that are out there, everything from compressed air storage to the next generation batteries. And so these technologies will often lead the skills required in the future. But so in addition to this technical skills that specific technologies require, there'll also be a requirement for core skills. Next slide. And within the core skills, I think we can also differentiate by occupations, or whether by the skill level occupations. And so for the overall economy, the education systems need to ensure, for example, education training systems need to ensure, for example, environmental awareness and protection, teamwork skills reflecting the need for organizations to work collectively, or communication negotiation skills, but also the more higher skilled occupations, there's also need for more analytical skills, for example, marketing skills to promote greener products, or consulting skills, or other networking, and IT skills and language skills. Next slide. So let me just wrap up this brief overview, intended really to provide some food for thought for further discussion. Is that the first of the key messages that better measurement and data is required to inform both young people, but also policymakers in the design and implementation of just transition policies and skills anticipation systems. Stimulating the impact of green policies aimed at achieving climate neutrality suggests that there are substantial welfare, economic, and employment gains, so net gains, to be had relative to a business as usual scenario. However, this aggregate net gains, they do mask job creation destruction by regions or countries, sectors, and demographic groups. So that is that those who will access these green jobs are not necessarily those who lose those jobs. So skills and social protection matter greatly, and also just for better skilled workforce, including in the appropriate technologies. A better skilled workforce is required to facilitate this transition. Next slide. So let me just wrap up with a few policy recommendations. Yes, please. Next, please. Thank you. So this is the last slide. And so in terms of policies, where do we want to get to? Where do we want policymakers to go? The first of these areas, we want, substantial countercyclical fiscal policies to be undertaken. By definition, these, for stimulus package to be undertaken during recessions, during periods of difficult time. And we know this, and we want this because we know, as Niall, in fact, has indicated in his presentation, and as research, young people are often, the first to lose their jobs during depressions or recessions. And so we need them we want them to be back into work as soon as possible. And so the need for counter-cyclical policies, we want economic and employment policies to integrate the concerns of workers, including young workers, and of course, investments in sectors that can create jobs in the digital, the green, or the care economies. And in order to get to these destinations, we need, investment in education and core skills and technical skills. As I mentioned, youth guarantees that focus, including on providing quality apprenticeships, have been particularly useful or efficient, and especially in European countries. We need social protection and policies, subsidized employment, as well as, of course, entrepreneurial skills and SME support. And within this journey, we need, of course, to pay particular attention to the most disadvantaged youth. So public employment services need to be strengthened in order to reach out to the most disadvantaged, integrate also occupational health, safety concerns, psychological support measures, and importantly, youth rights and voices. So next slide. So that's the end of our presentation. So thanks very much. Our email addresses are there. I think we will be staying a bit, but in case we can provide other clarifications, as well as a link there to the report itself. So thanks. Thank you very much. Let me stop here. And over to you, Samanjar.
Thank you so much, Kim and Niall. That was really informative for us. Now I welcome to Vicky to introduce us and represent the YEO 2030 initiative. Over to you, Vicky.
Thank you, Samanjar, and thank you, Ki and Niall. I think I was writing every sentence down in my notebook, so it was very insightful. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Vicky Aridi. I'm the program manager for the YEO 2030 initiative, which is Youth Economic Opportunities 2030 at Making Sense International. And before I share my screen to get started with the presentation, I'd like us to take 1 or 2 minutes just to reflect. What does a good or decent job mean to you? I hope you're reflecting and not going to pick coffee or water, but just saying. The second point, what constitutes a dream job for you? I'd like you to reflect through some of these questions as we go through the presentation and even throughout the session today, because we're really going to be talking about green and digital economies throughout the session. But for now, I'll be giving a bit of insights on the YEO 2030 initiative. Do let me know when you can see my screen.
It's coming. Yeah, we can see your screen, Vicky.
All right. Great. And so statistics have been shared today by our previous presenters, and I'd share some additional ones. So the population of young people continues to rise, but youth unemployment is also on the rise. Young people like myself are also 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults. And looking around, everyone keeps talking about youth economic opportunities, youth employment, and the need for collaboration to achieve SDG 8 on decent work. And that brings forth the YEO 2030 initiative, a very exciting initiative that brings together young people and the global ecosystem to really collaborate and see how can we maximize youth employment and really achieve sustainable economic growth, which is SDG 8 by 2030. And the initiative has evolved over time. Previously, in 2021 to 2022, we had youth dialogues across 18 countries where we were engaging with different partners on topical issues affecting youth economic opportunities, looking at issues like green economy, skills mismatch, ecosystem collaboration. And one thing kept coming up, that there's a need to look at new economies where young people can be able to tap into for decent jobs. Then we also had solution sessions and a regional convening. Now, this regional convening was very exciting because it provided an opportunity for 10 youth champions to come forward and to create action teams, which are working groups, that they would be able to together work on very exciting topics that I'll discuss later, from May 2022 to May 2023. And we had a Global Youth Economic Opportunity Summit, which really provided an opportunity for the global community to really join these action or working groups that the young champions had pioneered. And so the initiative really looks at three things, or three pillars. The first one on ready for the global workforce, looking at how can we support young people to effectively transition into the workforce in this ever-changing economy that's affected by climate change, digitalization, AI, and looking at what are these key issues that influence youth employment. The second pillar really on livelihoods through self-employment, which narrows in on entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs most so. What are the emerging policies and practices that we're seeing that support young entrepreneurs and their businesses? When we think about financial inclusion, what does youth-friendly financial services look like? Then the global context matters. What are the industries, systems, and policies that are affecting youth livelihoods? Looking more broadly at what does youth inclusion really mean? What is the private sector engagement when it comes to youth economic opportunities? How do young people affected by conflict and violence able to realize decent youth economic opportunities? These are some of the pillars that anchor our work. And really, our focus areas have been more broadly into four big buckets, I would like to say. The first one are action teams. And these are action teams that are being led by young champions across the globe. And we have 10 action teams. So action teams are like your working groups. And these action teams have been working together for a year to really work on a deliverable, as we like to say, that's big enough to matter and small enough to get done within a 12-month period. And we have a team on career guidance who are really looking at what are the best practices out there when we look at career guidance and counseling services integrated into education and training programs for young people. The Green Jobs Group has embarked on analyzing and really looking at what do green jobs mean for young people, and have conducted surveys and aim to develop a resource toolkit and a one-stop shop for young people around green jobs. And then inclusive workplaces, really looking at what does inclusion for young people with disabilities and minorities mean in the workplaces, and are having some fantastic in-country workshops in Tanzania, Philippines, and India to really hone into this with companies and young people from marginalized groups and really produce a toolkit on that. Then we also have social entrepreneurship, who are working on a fantastic footprint series that documents best practices from young entrepreneurs across the globe. Financial inclusion, really looking at how can we use gamification and blockchain technology to really meaningfully ensure that local youth-led and youth-serving organizations have access to knowledge and can build their financial literacy. And then mentorship for entrepreneurs, that is looking at how can we use a tool to analyze our mentorship programs and make them more decent and more sustainable for young entrepreneurs. And of course, the private sector engagement and youth inclusion, who are both doing exciting studies on those topics and sharing resources on the same. So that's a bit on our action teams. Next is really our summit. So we have a summit about 3.5 months from today, May 16th to May 18th. and it will be held in Washington, D.C. at the Silver Spring Civic Center. We're very excited for this summit because at the core of this summit is how can we elevate the voices and leadership of youth leaders? How can we bring together different stakeholders to learn, share best practices, and collaborate on youth economic opportunities? And really, how can we continue to link learning to action that translates to sustainable action for youth economic opportunities? And at this summit, the theme is YO Reimagined, Powering Youth-Led Action Towards 2030. So seeing how can we work with and for young people to really accelerate sustainable economic opportunities. And this is a summit that we have held since 2007 with young people and different stakeholders from over 75 countries tuning in. And for this year, we're looking at very interesting topics ranging from green jobs, career guidance, the digital economy, financial inclusion, mental health, entrepreneurship, and so on. So it's really going to be an exciting and an engaging discussion. And as part of the summit, we have a youth pre-summit that will be the first day of the summit. And this will really be a time for young leaders and global stakeholders to build their capacity, more so for the young leaders, mentorship, and more opportunities for them. So this is very exciting, and we'll do a little bit of an activity on this after this slide. And then the next really is on the YEO collaboration group. So this is a group that aims to see how can we strengthen collaboration within the youth economic opportunity space, because you realize a lot of different organizations, even many of us in this call, are doing similar things. So how can we strengthen collaboration? And for this group, we have ourselves, ILO through Decent Jobs for Youth. And then we also have UNICEF, World Bank through Solutions for Youth Employment, and Aspen Institute through the Global Opportunity Youth Network. And we have been able to map out synergies and see how can we start to collaborate. And the last tool, which is something we continue to update regularly, is the YEO ecosystem map. So this is a tool that really allows you to be able to see linkages with different stakeholders that are working in the same space, what they're doing, and how you can collaborate. So that's a little bit about the focus areas. And so just because I know we also have many young leaders and experienced leaders on the call, just wanted us to have a conversation. If you were to attend a youth summit focused on capacity building and mentorship for young leaders, what topics might be of interest to you? And I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can be able to see. So I'll stop sharing my screen, great. So maybe we'd like to hear from one or two leaders in the room. You can raise your hand or unmute or drop it in the chat.
Hi, can I speak, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is a very, very interesting and much needed topic to discuss. So I'm really glad that such kind of a summit is being planned. I did miss the first presentation, but I'm very keen to understand, are we planning to engage on youth which are connected with streets? Because like I work in Toy Box, and Toy Box works in Latin America and in Asia, and we do work with a lot of youth and are, you know, looking for opportunities, how they can be engaged in, and you know, decent work opportunities can be provided to them. So how does this whole thing work for them? Because most of them are far removed from, you know, digital world. They have zero understanding of green jobs, and they are all into informal space. So any quick comments there?
No, thank you for that. I think that's a very important topic. And really at the summits, that's why we usually have that youth pre-summits to also enable young leaders to be able to meaningfully engage on some of these topics for green, digital, that are newer to them. Then the second part of your question, which was really on how how can we engage young people from these diverse backgrounds and ensure that they are able to meaningfully participate in the conversation. So what we usually do is even post the summit, we usually have some post-summit sessions, and some of the content is always available for us to continue the conversation. In the summit, there is an opportunity for different stakeholders to participate, and we'd also be happy to I'll drop my email in the chat because of time, and we can continue the conversation to see what is possible. Thank you. I see 2 hands, so I'll maybe give Liadi and then move on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good day everyone, and I'm so glad to be here. So I'm very happy to hear about the Global Year Summit. And I want to ask that, is there a room for partnership? And it's part of our work we are doing in Nigeria at Island Africa. We focus on empowering marginalized community and empower young people on digital technology, and also train them on how they can advocate for social and political change. And I see that this platform will build off their interest. They will wish to join and participate. So is there any opportunity to maybe a side event from our own organization to gather young people from part of Africa to be part of the global summit, or if there is a room to create a side effect for them? So that's point number one. And on the topic, I think what I would like us to focus more is youth and digital innovation, because right now, with what we have we just presented now, we can see there's a lot of digital divide and a lot of digital inclusion. So we need to keep advocating for this and keep empowering young people on how they can leverage on digital technology to make a better life. So that's what I have for now. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Liad. I know we have a lot to unpack, so I'd ask if anyone else has any additional comments, if you can drop them in the chat, and we'll be sure to follow up. We've also shared our email contact in the chat, so you can be able to follow up with us. So just putting the last slide before I hand it back to the moderator. So I think for us, the last call to action would be engage in our upcoming summits. We'll drop the link in the chat for more details. If you're interested in following our work with the action teams, we'll also drop our email so that we can be able to link you with the appropriate action teams to follow with their work. And let's keep the conversation going and see how we can collaborate to really advance learning, collaboration, and strategic partnerships to accelerate SDG 8. So thank you so much for your time and for your engagement. I'll hand it back to Samanjar.
Thank you so much, Vicky. That was a really amazing presentation, and thank you for making us reflect some of the questions that you asked. Please, everyone, stay tuned to YEO 2030 website that has been dropped on the chat box. And Vicky and Natasha, I can see they have shared their email IDs, so you can be connected with them. And please follow up the upcoming 2023 Global YEO Summit. So since we have learned a lot from our experts, we have heard, and it is now high time and do a deep dive on some of these exciting issues. Now it's your time to discuss, and any questions you want to raise in front of the experts or your demands. We have set up 6 thematic breakout rooms on the green and digital economy. You can choose your group, so please select and join a room where your facilitator will guide you through the discussion and connect you through the other participants. So again, I'm saying you will be seeing breakout room sessions on your bottom of your screen, and you can choose either green or digital economy and join the group. Right side at the bottom, you'll see the breakout rooms. There's green 1, 2, 3, and digital 4, 5, 6. We can see green 1, distant jobs, green 2, stakeholders action, green 3, gender and disability, digital 4, decent job, digital 5, stakeholders action, digital 6, gender and disability. So welcome back everyone in the plenary session. I hope you had a meaningful discussion with your group members. Let's hear back of what they have discussed, all the groups. I would request Chukudi, who's from Green Group 1. The question was, what are the examples of decent green jobs for youth that you are aware of, and what makes those jobs decent? Chukudi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In our breakout session, we had very wonderful deliberations and some of the suggestions. Let me just run through the opinions. There says it helps us in mitigating and adapting to climate change, renewable energy, working as solar panels, installers, and must pay above minimum wage. And other suggestions said that it guarantees it guarantees today and tomorrow for youth. Okay, biomass to energy, important for green economy, and agriculture helps the community as well. So then there is a question suggested by one participant. She was asking if informal jobs that pay beyond or above minimum wage would be considered as decent jobs. So she's seeking clarifications from the experts too, for them to also help her understand better if there's informal jobs that pay above minimum wage, although it's not kind of sustainable, because according to her, you may have paid today, you may not have paid tomorrow, but when the pay comes, is above minimum wage. So she wants to understand better if such could be considered as a decent job as well. Then further suggestions say the green entrepreneurship. Okay, young people to start that needs to be supported to start their own businesses to tackle climate change and promote sustainability. Then other suggestions say the innovation or advocacy in sustainable agriculture, then self-working conditions and opportunity for professional development. We also have, let me just run through this quickly. We have a policy that boosts environmental friendly careers with an interest in preserving their natural surroundings, use fewer resources. Then government incentives to help youth innovation, focus on green jobs. Youth needs to be supported. Then our further suggestion, there's the patent rights need to be protected, especially in Africa, to be promoted, Then emphasis on policy by different bodies, then stakeholders working together. These are some of the, then strengthening training programs and job matching for youth decent jobs, include vulnerable youth and youth in rural areas. So these are some of the wonderful contributions we got from our breakout sessions. Thank you. Back to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Chukudi. Thank you for updating and what was discussed in the group 1. So Green Group 2, I will invite Lena. And the question was, what needs to be done by governments, employers, and trade unions to ensure decent green jobs for youth?
Thank you, Samanjar. Actually, we nominated a reporter for our group, Alban, who will be representing us. And thank you so much to all the members who contributed wonderful insights during the discussion. Over to you, Alban. Maybe you would like to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Alban Chango. I am based in South Africa, working with Global Water Partnership. And I would just like to say to the organizers of this meeting, thank you very much. I think this is very important what we are doing. And in terms of what we have discussed during our group, breakout group, we spoke about the need for financial funding, for financial support, and the need for developing or assisting the youth in developing business plans that can actually help them to access funding. And this comes from experience within the water sector, where we have green innovators who are there, but they still lack financial support. Apart from that, there were also points on the aspect of national policy guidance, where it's important that the youth who are the mostly impacted have governments who can actually put together policies or national policies that will address job creation within the green sector. And in terms of green jobs being created in a sustainable manner, we have Haino Samuel, who highlighted the need to look at the sustainability or the strategies or the tools that are used in the creation of these green jobs. There's also the fact that highly educated and technical youth are advocating for green jobs. And they are green jobs, but they aren't decent. So like trash collection. So yeah, the point was basically focusing on the need to create decent jobs for the green economy, specifically for the youth. There's also the need to invest more in the green sector from the government. And this is a point that was done by Mr. Onyango. There's also lack of youth participation at policy-making level, which basically we're looking at the fact that there are less youth actors at decision-making level, and there's need for integration. Like, for example, this forum, which is bringing together the older generation and the younger generation to address issues around green jobs. Apart from that, there was also a point on more employers and trade unions need to be created that would advocate for a good pay within the sector, that would also advocate for good working condition within the sector. And the last point was on qualification, competence issues, hinder youth from participating in the green economy, and there are little opportunity in the sector. So, and that point as well was provided by Mr. Onyango. Thank you. I hope I've done justice to the group. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. That was a great discussion. We can understand. And from Green Group 3, it was Vicky. As a facilitator, I would like to invite you. And the question was, what gender and disability diversity considerations need to be included in green jobs program for young people?
Thanks, Samanjar. I'll share my screen. I don't know if Dunbe is still on the call. Can share some thoughts from our discussion. Dunbe, are you still on the call? All right.
We can see your screen.
All right. Is Deji also on the call, or he's also left? Okay. In the interest of time, I'll just share some highlights from our group. So some of the considerations include around issues to do with skills, that there's a need, especially for young women, to have access to these STEM courses that are necessary for the green jobs, and that the policies for these programs should have gender and disability considerations. And even bearing in mind, when you're talking about these policies, the traditions that permeate certain countries, the issue of advocacy to help raise awareness for these different considerations is something that came up quite a bit. And then considering that women and persons living with disability play a key role as change makers. And then there's also an issue of seeing, when you're designing programs, how can you ensure that in your monitoring and evaluation, there's a certain quota that gives for these considerations. So those were some of the highlights. Back to you, Samanjar.
Thank you so much, Vicky. So let's move on the digital economy part. So group number 1, digital economy, facilitator was Patricia. Patricia, I would like to invite you to represent. And also the question was, what are the examples of decent/good digital jobs for youth that you are aware of, and what makes them decent? Over to you, Patricia.
Hi, Samanjar. Thank you so much. I am unable to share my screen. If someone could check, please, but I will start up the same way. So on digital economy, the first question, oh, thank you so much, Vic. It was about what are the examples of decent and good digital jobs. And what appeared during the discussion, it was a lot of jobs connected to marketing, technology fields, and also education. And what makes them decent, I was really surprised positively that what we really want is have your work values. So make part of the decision-making process is really important. Be able to thrive in our career with a vision of long term, it was important also, and make sure that decent jobs are connected to follow human rights. So we need to also think about connection, about how to increase the access to internet and better equipment to provide support for who are young and would like to work on digital. And we focused also on this part of decent job is a job that at the same time providing you access to training, to education, to pathways to you become a better employer, to you improve your skills during that position and active leadership positions even being young. So it was a lot of highlights about the powerful of digital jobs around flexibility, around freedom, but at the same time around respect and how this is important. And about the examples, as I told you, is about remote jobs, marketing skills, design, digital marketing, blockchain, technology, web development. And we know that the future is have more and more options of good digital works, and we hope that this is happening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patricia. Digital breakout from room number 2. The question was, what needs to be done by the government, employers, and trade unions to ensure that the jobs for youth in the digital economy are decent? I would like to invite Karina.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me give the floor to Dib, who is kindly taking the note for our group to summarize. And I'm sharing the screen. I hope, hope you can see it.
Yeah, thank you, Samanjar, and thank you, Karina. So there was a rich discussion in our group regarding what has changed after the digitization and especially the advent of digital economy. Access to employment and definition of employment we discussed has fundamentally changed, especially when we're talking about the digital economy. In that vein, there is more need for the workers who are involved in the digital economy for them to have their rights. And one of them that we discussed was the possibility for the youth to be who are working in the digital economy to unionize freely, and those rights to be respected, freedom of association and other rights. There were also conversation around how early career digital jobs, they might be more precarious than what late career jobs might be. So, and regarding that, ensuring decent wages who are working in the digital economy, that was something that we discussed as well. We also discussed that we need to build and develop digital products and services that support inclusion, development, and are human-centered, and do not just go towards automation. But even if it goes towards automation, it needs to be, inclusive, and that, increases productivity, because productivity is something that is falling as of now, and technology can be our huge tool in overcoming that. Then we spoke about the concept of digital nomads. Was it good? Somebody from Indonesia shared that how in Bali, they recently, gave visas for digital nomads to come and work there. So on one hand, is it good because of it's a boost to tourism, more people coming in, or on the other hand, does it shrink, overcrowd the market, job market. So this was also discussed. Another thing we discussed is taxation for people who are in digital economy, because as Patricia mentioned, with new technologies such as blockchain and the concept of location becoming less relevant in that situation, how do you tax the people who are involved in digital economy? And that cannot be our traditional system. So there's a need for change to that. That's something we discussed. We also spoke about the digital divide and how we need to overcome that with more access for people who are in the rural, who constitute the rural population, and further democratize the process of digitalization and have everybody access the digital jobs. Also, another thing we spoke about, how digital work environments need to be respectful. With mass layoffs in big tech, as we are seeing, the work environment and communication need to be respectful, and taking into consideration that these are, after all, in the end, people and not just computers. Then we spoke about the need for tripartite social dialogue with employers, workers, and the government talking to each other to make, to have the necessary rules and regulations and support and security for the people, for the employers, and the workers, right? And there's also finally the need for employers to respect the workers' rights as well as the government. These are some of the things that we discussed, and hopefully the conversation continues.
Thank you, Deep. For digital group number 3, Maya, you can present. And the question was, what gender and disability diversity consideration needs to be included in youth employment programs in the digital economy?
Thank you. And I don't know if Eva will share the screen with the different insights, but we had a very lively conversation, and thank you so much for everyone who was part of this breakout session. I see the screen coming up. Perfect. So as you see, there were lots of very good insight and very detailed ones. What we have seen is that there was a consideration of systems, first of all. So designing programs have to already include people with disabilities and gender. So for example, having consideration of social security protection, such as childcare and unpaid work, or also having a universal design that is created in the digital groups to make it accessible for everyone, not just for marginalized groups. Also, what was really interesting is that someone has mentioned that people with disabilities are missing from the data, so that has to be corrected. And also, when it comes to young women, it has to be addressed how they experience violence and online harassment in the digital space. Also, what was touched upon was education, of course. So education systems have to be adapted for any economic transformation, but also keep in mind gender and disability. Also, infrastructures have to be set in place when it comes to, for example, we want to make opportunities more accessible for young people, but they don't have laptops to have the information for job opportunities in the digital space. So infrastructures have to be set in place and accessible for everyone. Also, as it was mentioned before, there has to be more focus on young women when it comes to opportunities in the STEM sector. Also, we have to consider differences in health access, as there might be a difference between women and men. And we also have to make platforms more inclusive, such as for the visually impaired. So overall, there really needs to be also an access to information and capacity building for people with disabilities and of different genders. So to have them access skills, training, and education into the digital space. I think that was most of it overall. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. What a wonderful discussion and meaningful engagement. Thank you so much for the discussions and the points. We are taking notes from your discussion. So I would like to invite our speakers, Keith. And we have seen this discussion as an expert. You have seen this discussion. So if you would like to add any comments, and I would like to address the one question from the chat, and that is, what do the speakers see as the main data gaps in youth employment? Is it in dream job? Is it in better understanding NEET status? It will vary by countries, of course, but what should government focus on strengthen the evidence base for youth empowerment investments? 4 questions in one. Over to you, Keith.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Samanjar. I think we're pretty close to the allocated time, so I'll be very brief, but I just wanted to say that I was particularly struck by, I think, group 2 and by our friend Albin, who mentioned that, you know, the importance of youth participation in decision making. And I think just to emphasize, and of course, this is something also that was emphasized by the UN and the Secretary General in their report, the Common Agenda. And I think it's important to emphasize it for the need for young people to be engaged, not only at the policy level, but also politically. I think, you know, as was emphasized in the Secretary General's report, I think there's young people may sometimes become jaded, you know, and not participate in political and democratic process, and the need to continue that. But also, of course, as part of that, you know, decision making, you know, participate as young people in trade unions as well as employee organizations. In terms of the data, I think the challenge is really that in many countries around the world, like for example, in high income countries, labor force surveys, you know, that assess statistical surveys that assess the situation of labor markets are undertaken every month. And so they know very much, you know, very quickly what are some of the major, you know, impacts in the labor market. And so these, you know, help with policy making and as such. But in many developing countries, such labor force surveys or even a census is not undertaken for many, many years. So as, you know, the digital transformation, as a green transition happens, labor market adjustments are likely to accelerate. And so the need really to be able to put a pulse on those changes. And so the need really for more data in general, especially in lower income developing countries. Let me leave it at that. Thank you, Samanjar.
Thank you so much. As we are running out of time, I will ask Niall to reflect from your discussions, the group discussion.
Yeah, just very quickly, a few points came up, very interesting discussions and presentations. One, just in response to just connected to some of the other points, informality. No, so can high wage informal employment be good? It's not decent work. It's the issue is not just about decent wages. It's also about protection, and this is something that issue came up quite a lot with digital. It's about job progression and job security or career security, if you like, and not so much job security but career. How to develop and how can one gain competences which are transferable. But there are some basics here. The other is about access. Came up in green and digital. The issue of access and of female access through greater encouragement of women in STEM subjects. I mean, this is a basic issue that needs to be addressed by at national levels, encouraging young women to participate more in STEM subjects, because that's where the best quality, the highest paid, best quality digital jobs are too. The what else? Yes, and then there's of course in digital there's also the access related to infrastructure, which also came up in the digital 2 group. You know, we need to create basic access conditions, so access for women, access for young people with disabilities, and so on. And there are means in the digital sphere in which one can facilitate that. But we also need to ensure that young people can access the internet. So affordable internet access is a pretty basic requirement for young people throughout to broaden access more generally, particularly in poorer countries and particularly in rural areas. What else? Oh yes, there was this issue about multiple jurisdictions and taxation and so on, how digital nomads. Well, there are also digital means where one can quite simply deal with these kind of issues and sort of automate these processes of taxation, contribution to social security. And there's a need to deal with it at a multilateral, let's say international level. And the ILO has long experience. One of the main raison d'etre of the ILO is establishing multiple jurisdiction rules in the maritime industry, where you have quite a different situation, but it has the similar kind of multiple jurisdiction. You're working in one jurisdiction, or you're not working in any definable jurisdiction. Which rules should apply? And there, I would suggest it's maybe worth looking at some of the initiatives there. But basically, one needs international level agreements on this kind of thing. But very very interesting. But I would put emphasis on the basic access condition, the basic condition, and digitalization itself. Digitalization can help, for example, organizing. Young people can organize through social media, through, let's say, alternative means, and there are lots of ways of doing it, and it's being done, that young people organize and establish protections for themselves. And this you're seeing more and more in online platform-based work. And I think with that, I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Niall. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this meaningful dialogue today. We have taken notes for your excellent inputs today, and we hope to continue this discussion in the community forum with you and many more young people from all over the world. And also we invite you to follow our website to learn about future engagement opportunities, that is YEO 2023 Summit and ILO pages. And this marks the end of our webinar today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the great discussion. And thank you, our honorable speakers.